100%.
Let's move on now. This is a very interesting story indeed. Of course, we know that Conservative Party conference starts tomorrow. The general election is looming. I said yesterday on Breakfast when I covered for Mike the day before that actually I'm beginning to wonder whether the Conservative Party is starting to be conservative. Rishi Sunak is starting to make the sort of noises that actually I think the core vote likes. We can see that in terms of the polling. We can see the Labour lead is actually reducing. And this story also feeds into this narrative. A group of Conservative MPs, including Sir Jake Berry, Sir Brandon Lewis, the Right Honourable Liz Truss and Dame Priti Patel, they've signed a pledge to their constituents saying they will never, ever vote again for an increase in overall taxes. This is a group of 32 Conservative MPs. You've got one former Prime Minister, a former leader of the Conservative Party, 9 former cabinet ministers, all coming together. Now, it's worth remembering, of course, our tax burden is at a 70-year high. It's the highest that we have seen in living memory. It's the high. It goes back to the Second World War, the end of the Second World War. We were actually rebuilding the country. So this is quite significant, I think, and I'm delighted to be joined now by Sir Jake Berry, Conservative MP, and of course one of those signatories of this letter to the Prime Minister and indeed to the constituents, and he joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, David. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolute pleasure, and I'm delighted that you are here. This is significant, as I say. The tax burden is at a 70-year high. People across the country really feeling the pinch. The Conservative Party is meant to be a low-tax party. It's meant to believe in individual freedom. I'm not seeing that.
Well, David, you're quite right. I mean, just to be absolutely clear, this pledge is a personal pledge that I made to the British people and to my own constituents, saying, in terms of my own behaviour, I won't vote for any more tax rises. I'm going to be seeking more members of Parliament to sign up to it. You don't just have to be a Conservative. I would be delighted, David, if a Labour MP decided to sign it, or an SNP MP. So it's not just Conservatives. But the truth is that when I talk to my constituents, with taxes very, very high, a cost of living crisis, you know, the money they earn is their money. And the truth is the government is just taking too much of it away from them. And that's why I'm so delighted that my fellow Conservative MPs have put a line in the concrete saying thus far and no further.
And it's very interesting to me in terms of timing. The front page of the Times this morning, we can't let tax rises go on forever, insists Jeremy Hunt. This is the man who is presiding over high taxes.
Well, look, we have to accept that the only reason taxes go up, it's not the great British voters' fault. It's not even pensioners' fault or the NHS's fault, as we hear from the Institute for Fiscal Studies yesterday. It is because MPs keep voting for it. And that is why we have made this pledge saying, in my regard to my constituents, I've given them my personal pledge that I will not vote for tax to go up. It's all right for the Conservative Party to talk about being the party of low tax, but that won't wash if you were the government of high tax. It's high time that collectively we came together and said we won't vote for any more tax increases. And the people who have signed this pledge, the 33 I think it is, but we're going to be coming out with more later in the week, are true Conservatives fighting for Conservative values on behalf of the British people and their constituents.
So how much of this is because you really believe it, and how much of this is political posturing because there's a general election coming round the corner?
Well, I do believe it. I say it's not a political thing. It is a personal pledge. It doesn't have the Conservative Party logo on it. It's called The Tax Pledge. It's my pledge to the hardworking people in my constituency of Rosendale and Darwin. And it's just saying to them, look, guys, I know it's tough. You work really hard. Money's hard to come by. And if you have me as your MP, I won't be voting for the government to take any more away from you.
And in terms of that, I'm looking back at the mini-budget Liz Truss much derided. Was she right? Because essentially she said we need to cut tax. Now, many people will say the reason it failed is partly because there were forces that wanted her to fail. But secondly, she didn't brief the markets. It was badly implemented and possibly she went too far too fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said, look, I was in Liz Truss's cabinet, and anyone who was sat around that cabinet table should sort of hold their hands up and say, you know, the implementation was wrong. I actually think the principle of a lower tax economy that is a globally growing economy is the right one. Look, this part of this pledge to my constituents in Rosendale and Darwin is to say you cannot tax your way out of the hole we are in. We have to grow our way out of that hole. That means lower taxes and things. And I know it's as dry as dust, but things like supply side reform, reforming planning so we can build more houses, so young people can get on the housing ladder, and all of those controversial things. For far too long, it has just been too easy for every government to just put up taxes and they've moved away from tackling long-term reform. We need a positive vision for Britain, and my vision for my constituents in Rosendale and Darwin and for Britain as a Conservative is one where taxes do not go up. We grow the economy to deal with the long-term problems we have in our economy. We don't just decide to take more and more of your own money away from you.
And just in terms of the new direction, I think it is a new direction of the Conservative Party. As we see, as Rishi Sunak has started to row back slightly on net zero, as he's starting to pledge new oil from Rosefield, for example, I think you can see the shift in the opinion polls. I think the Labour lead is now softening as the Conservative Party seems to get itself together. I said this yesterday, I still don't know what Labour stands for. I'm not even sure quite what the Conservative Party stands for. One of the biggest issues that will hit you, and Rishi Sunak has deflected 12 times now, is HS2. Now, clearly he doesn't want to say anything before the conference in Manchester to say that he's scrapping HS2, which, by the way, goes to Manchester. Should we scrap HS2? Should we carry on? Do we do part of it? Do we go to Birmingham? What do you think we should do?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the Prime Minister's doing a brilliant job, actually. I think his environmental reforms in terms of net zero, I'm outdoor knocking in Lancashire 2-3 times a week talking to my voters, and it's been really popular. Look, on HS2, the bit of HS2 I care about is the bit between Manchester and Manchester Airport, which is the first part of Northern Powerhouse Rail or Crossrail. I was on a train yesterday, funnily enough, going from Manchester to London. It's an hour and 57 minutes. It doesn't really make a difference to my life. It's going to be an hour and 40 minutes. What does make a huge difference to people like me who live and work in the north of England, I run a business in the north of England, my family business is in the north of England, is getting across the north of England. And so if the Prime Minister is going to change HS2, in a way, that's sort of fine as far as I'm concerned, as long as that pivot is to say we will immediately build Crossrail for the north and you won't have to keep waiting. Because if we look at London, it's got Crossrail 1, Crossrail 2, HS1, and now shortly to get HS2, maybe just at Old Oak Common, which is absolutely bonkers, frankly. But anyway, that's a different issue.
Well, it's frankly bonkers. I would agree with you. I said this yesterday.
Why should it for the north of England? I mean, it is like, why should the north of England really have to make a choice? But if it does have to make a choice, then we would choose, I believe, Crossrail for the north.
So can I just ask you?
Yes, David, let me make Old Oak Common, which is a bit like someone phoning you up and saying, I've got a flight to London, Southend Airport.
London Southend.
Yeah, Old Oak Common is not in London in any meaningful way. Just as Southend, wonderful city as it is, wonderful airport as it is not London. It needs HS2, whatever we do, that needs to end up in Euston. It is just bizarre to even be considering anything else.
But this is the issue for me, which is Rishi Sunak then defended Old Oak Common. He said it's a fantastic station. It's not. It's a freight yard. It's nowhere near central London. Sorry?
Well, it doesn't even exist. It doesn't even exist yet.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? The Prime Minister is saying it's a great station. It doesn't exist.
Well, that's for the Prime Minister. I made my point. People who fly to London don't want to end up in Southend, as wonderful as Southend is.
I think you make really good points, and I think the connection between east and west of this country is absolutely appalling. But the problem is we've started HS2, and the question is either you scrap the whole lot, I think, or you do the whole lot. I don't think there should be a middle ground here. Also, lots of things in terms of tax. What would you do, given that you don't want increases in tax? What about inheritance tax? There's a story this morning saying the vast majority of people want to see it scrapped. We've had pledges before. I think the Conservatives are going to pledge to either increase the level or get rid of it. But the problem is pledges don't often get followed through.
Well, look, you're quite right. I naturally oppose death taxes. It does seem to me completely immoral that the government taxes you after your death. I've got 3 kids, so I want to pass what I've worked hard for my whole life onto my children, my parents feel exactly the same. It's completely normal. People don't like death taxes. What this tax pledge does, it doesn't say that we should put up one type of tax or another. It just says there is an overall tax burden which will include death taxes, and that should not go up. Because people, I know certain taxes are unpopular, but these stealth taxes that governments bring in are just as unpopular, but people don't feel them. This is a line drawn by Conservative MPs, 33 members of Parliament, to say, actually, as Conservatives, we won't vote for taxes to go up. And, how the government sort of manages this tax or that tax is for them. We're talking about the overall burden, and we ain't going to be voting for any more taxes.
Can I just bring Dr. Renee in? I can see you very anxious to ask a question.
Morning, Jake. All I wanted to ask, Jake, morning. I just wanted to ask, what about the actual thresholds? Because obviously in freezing those, we've actually dragged more people into tax that they wouldn't have paid. Will they go up as well?
Well, that's why we talk about the overall tax burden, Dr. Renee, because, I've mentioned about these stealth taxes. It's a sort of a creeping sort of taxation that's grabbing us all. And that's why we are saying to the government, don't bring forward any more stealth taxes, inheritance taxes, any other type of tax, VAT, tax on tobacco. We expect it to be like a balancing scale. And as with one hand where the government takes money away from you, we expect them to give back with the other hand to ensure that we do not go beyond this 75-year high. It is a pledge to my constituents and to the British people that if I am in Parliament, this is a pledge I will stick to. I won't be moving away from it. I know manifestos are things that political parties breach. This is not a manifesto. It's a personal pledge to my constituents, which I will stick to. And it is saying to them, I just get it. I understand it's really tough at the moment. You're working really hard to bring money into your household, and the government is taking too much, and that definitely should not go up.
Can I just put a question to you from one of our viewers saying, we will never see tax cuts again if we have to feed and home millions of migrants. Where does Jake Berry think the money is going to come from? This also feeds into the bigger debate about migration. This is an Achilles heel of the government. We have an illegal migration problem. I think we also have a legal migration problem. We've got legal migration of in excess of 600,000. What are the Conservatives going to do about that? And if I may just link into the question that I'm asking today, what role does the church have here in deciding policy? Welby wants to meet Braverman. Braverman so far is refusing. What do we do about the migrant crisis, and how do you solve that?
Well, David, look, if there was a quick fix, the government would have done it, and it's not for want of trying that we, on the government's behalf, that we are still struggling with this crisis. First of all, we've got to get the Rwanda policy through. I think that is a huge disincentive to people who come to this country. I also think that we need to leave the ECHR and replace it with a British Bill of Rights. I think it should be up to British politicians actually how we deal defending our own sovereign immigration policy. I believe in the power of Parliament. That's why I'm saying, that we're going to sign this tax pledge, because taxes only go up because MPs vote for it, and therefore if MPs stop voting for it, they'll stop going up. I believe in the power of the British Parliament when it comes to immigration, just like I do with tax. And look, just in terms of Justin Welby, I'm a proud Christian and communicant within the Church of England. I do think actually the church has a role to be a moral conscience and speak for the speak to some extent for the British people. Even if lots of people don't go to church, we're still a majority Christian country, and it is still the established religion of our nation. I think Suella Braverman should meet Justin Welby. Should she change her mind or change her policy just because he says something? Absolutely not. But she should listen to him, because he's a very learned gentleman who speaks for many people, including myself, who are Christians in this country. I just wonder if the chief rabbi was trying to see her, or a very senior imam within the Islamic faith here in the UK, whether she would be rebuffing them. We are, we have an established church. We are a Christian country. We're officially a Christian country. I do think she should meet him.
And just finally, just going back to this letter to the group of 32 Conservative MPs, you're calling on MPs from other parties to join and also to sign this. Do you think Labour will sign it?
Well, I hope they will, because it's not a political campaign. It isn't about being a Conservative. Yes, it is absolutely Conservative values not to increase taxes. But we've already heard from Keir Starmer that he is going to make a pledge not to increase taxes on working people. The challenge for Keir is I don't think I believe him. And I don't think the British people believe him either. And that's why if they're really serious about this, they should sign this tax pledge directly with their own voters, their own constituents, to say, look, we get it, taxes are too high, and if, you have my personal pledge that they won't go up as long as I'm your Member of Parliament.
Jake, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Jake Berry, Conservative MP there, joining us.